Good afternoon, and thank you for being with us for another webinar that this time will be focusing on a very different topic to the ones that we have been through over the last weeks. Maybe you have participated in previous webinar sessions, and during the last weeks, we had focused on support measures in times of COVID, and basically many other things related to COVID and how businesses could be supported in this particular time. Something that has happened for sure during COVID is that we have seen a very big drive related to online, consumers buying more online, businesses being present more online transactions, and that is all well and good, but it's important that we are very prepared when it comes to online, because there are a number of threats that we will be discussing today relating to online and specifically targeting businesses. This is most unfortunate, but it is a reality that we have had to become accustomed to. What I can say is, as a Chamber of SMEs, we receive regular queries and complaints from our members telling us that they have fallen victim to some kind of cyber crime. We will be explaining what these problems are and also how to avoid them, how to look out for them, and how to prevent them. So today, what I wanted to tell you also is that the session is welcoming your interventions from the audience, as well as questions that you have as we go along. So please, you don't need to wait for a Q&A session. Just post in your questions. We would prefer if you use the chat, and if possible, unless there is something that is particularly sensitive, when putting the question, in the blue line, in the blue highlighted text, mark all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your question, and like that we can coordinate better. And I also draw your attention that other ways to keep in touch with us, apart from these webinars and meetings that we hold, is to look at our Facebook page, which we update regularly with the main issues we would be handling. You can also chat with us on Facebook Messenger, something that our members use very frequently. And we also have a WhatsApp alert system for businesses where we alert you on the most important topics and news that are related to businesses. We will be posting the relevant number and link very soon. It is 9999, so 495199. I urge you to register so that we will just tell you that something important has been sent to you or draw your attention on the most important things. So today, I can start introducing our panel of speakers. Our first speaker will be Mr. Alex Bevan. He is the head of fraud of Western Union Business Solutions. Western Union is a global payments partner, and it provides fast and cost-effective payment solutions. I believe that Alex will be talking to us about the security aspect. In your good hands, Alex.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invite, and thank you everyone for having me. As has been mentioned, obviously we're talking about online fraud today, and I very much wanted to talk about business email compromise. Now, during COVID-19, what we've seen is that whilst the typology has slightly changed in that fraudsters have been using the excuse of COVID-19, the pandemic, and certain situations in relation to that, be it that the excuse of, say, a bank manager has died because of COVID-19 and the reason for changing the bank account, or perhaps the actual item that's being tried to be bought is actually, personal protection equipment. The root sort of methodology with regard to a lot of the frauds that we've seen online has always been business email compromise. And I think it's very important, especially when you look at the figures in relation to business email compromise. I mean, we're talking about 26.2 billion over the last few years globally. It's very important that we look at the red flags in relation to that and how we can mitigate the risk, because I think it's very important as well to understand that business email compromise is not a sophisticated fraud. It is something that we can all effectively mitigate. So I'm going to go through today, as I say, business email compromise. I'm going to explain what it is, explain the type of methodology, the different types, talk about the associated red flags, which are very important, and then how to mitigate the risk as a business. So what is business email compromise? Well, effectively, in a nutshell, business email compromise is effectively where a business is deceived into sending the payment to a different bank account than they intended. Either it'd be a case of the banking instructions are changed by the fraudster, or they're given false banking instructions to start off with. Now, the precursor to that may be phishing or spear phishing, but ultimately it's about being deceived, as a business being deceived. Now, you may have heard of business email compromise mentioned by different sort of names. It can be CEO fraud, it could be vendor fraud, it could be mandate fraud. There's a lot of different names to it, but effectively it is business email compromise, business email fraud that is the sort of overall heading for it. So in terms of the actual fraud itself, there are sort of three stages of it that you need to be aware. First and foremost, as I said, it's about being deceived. It's about the fraudsters sending an email. Now, this can be, as I say, following a phishing or spear phishing. It could be that the company is being targeted with regard to spear phishing. And the reality is that the fraudsters in and around business email compromise are not very specific. It's a case of who can give them money. You know, it's a case of what has been compromised. We're not talking about the high-end stuff here. We're not talking about the millions and millions of sort of instances of business email compromise where it's very much targeted against a particular organization. I'm talking about the SMEs here. I'm talking about the business email compromises. And in reality, most frauds involving business email compromise are under $50,000. So, you know, these are day-to-day transactions involving, you know, the smaller businesses. So as I say, it's about them being targeted. It's about them receiving an email. Predominantly, it's about receiving an email in relation to a transaction that's taking place. And I'll go through the sort of stages of that. So as I say, it's about receiving an email. It's about being deceived into changing the banking instructions in first and foremost, that you might be asked to change the beneficiary name with regard to that. But that is about, you know, in terms of changing the instructions. And finally, it's about sending the payment. Now, that could be anyone or in your company. It could be the CFO if you have a CFO. It could be a person who deals with invoices. It really doesn't matter to the fraudster in relation to business email compromise. All they're after is someone who actually controls the transaction, and that's who they'll target. And it may be that they find that out with regard to an email chain that they've intercepted. So, talking through the actual stages of business email compromise, they talk about phishing and spear phishing. And is that the catalyst with regard to business email compromise? Well, I've seen some figures recently where they talk about 36% and rising with regard to business email compromise. And I think it's probably easier to explain that, you know, these sort of happen because there has been a compromise of your email account. And that may be, as I say, because of phishing, where you've inadvertently pressed on a link, or it might be your customer or supplier who's inadvertently pressed on a link, or it could be where your business is being targeted. But effectively, your email account has been compromised so that the fraudsters can actually see a transaction that's taking place. And when I say a transaction, if you think about the transactions you do with your customer stroke supplier, they could be over a long time. It could be a number of weeks where you're exchanging emails back and forward. And the fraudsters are effectively, by the compromise, looking at those emails. And they are waiting for the point at which you effectively are exchanging banking details. You are effectively saying, okay, well, we all pay for the goods. Where do you want the money sent? And that may be the same bank account that's happened for many years in relation to your supplier, your customer. You know, it may not have changed. So, for example, we'll take the example that you're dealing with a customer and you've always paid them in Malta with regard to the goods. And, you know, the fraudsters are looking at this and they're waiting for the point where the last email has been sent. They don't want to step in too early. If they step in too early, then there's a situation where, you know, there's going to be some confusion with regard to the banking details. So they're watching an email chain between you and your supplier. And in that last email, the supplier said, yes, pay the $50,000 for whatever the goods are, and please pay it into our Maltese bank account. That's fine with you. You've done that time and time again. But then maybe 2 hours later, you'll receive an email and you think it's from the supplier, because in most cases, people don't look at the email address that's come through. They believe because the information that's actually in the email is coming from their supplier. So they'll read that email and it says, please don't send the money to our Maltese bank account because of, and they'll give a reason. I'll go through that as we talk about the red flags, but they will give a reason and they will say, look, don't send it to our Maltese bank account. Can you send it to our bank account in Hong Kong? Now, I say Hong Kong. In 25% of cases in relation to business email compromise, this is sort of backed up by the FBI and ourselves with regard to our own research. 25% of cases, in the first instance, the fraudsters will say, can you, send the money onto a bank account in China or Hong Kong? In the first sort of years when we were talking about business email compromise, the FBI used to call it ground zero, but effectively it is where the money may go in the first instance. So that is a sort of good indicator for you. So coming back to our example, the fraudsters said, look, don't send it to Malta. Can you send it to our bank account in Hong Kong? Now, you're believing, because they've got all the details with regard to the transaction, that it's come from your supplier. You're not suspicious with regard to that. You're not thinking about fraud, and therefore you process a transaction. You reach out to your, whoever's going to make the payment on your behalf, and effectively redirect the payment. And that payment gets sent, and you're sending over that payment to Hong Kong. Now, you're probably thinking straight away, well, I'm clearly obviously sending out to the fraudster's bank account. But the reality of business email compromise, it's not just about a gang that's targeting, business email compromise and that has a bank account which belongs to them. Effectively, this is part of a bigger sort of business where the actual bank account itself might belong to someone who has been, is the subject of a romance scam, and they don't know anything with regard to you, and all they've got is instructions from the fraudster that some money should be coming into their account. But effectively, money will go into their account and then it will be passed down the line, either taken out over the counter or pass through another bank account. And that is the 4 stages of business email compromise. Now, from our experience and from the experience of the FBI and other sort of law enforcement institutions, there are a number of red flags in relation to this, and we have 7. And before I go any further, it's not to say that you're going to see all 7 in an instance where that potentially there is a business email compromise, but the idea is to be aware of these. And if you start to see them with regard to a transaction, and you should always be, have a heightened sort of concern if you're receiving sort of beneficiary changes or dealing with a new beneficiary. But if you see one of these red flags, or maybe more of them, then you should be suspicious. Now, the first one is a change of country with regard to the beneficiary bank. With regard to all of these, it's about a beneficiary bank account, which is controlled by the fraudster. And time again, it has been seen that the country will change. And the reality is that the country will change because the beneficiary bank, the business email compromise team will have mule accounts in certain countries. They can't always have a mule account in the same country that originally the banking instructions were for. They can't control that. Originally, you were going to pay to a bank account in Malta. They're not picking you because you have a bank account in Malta. They're picking you because your email chain has been compromised, and therefore they can make, potentially do a fraud. So they have to take what is given to them. They have to take the fact that it's a bank account in Malta, and therefore, if they don't have a bank account in Malta to use as a mule account, they have to use what they've got. And more often than not, that is going to be in a different country. It could be that it's on the other side of the world. As I say, it could be China and Hong Kong. But that is your potentially the first red flag in relation to business email compromise. The bank account is being asked to be changed, and it's in a different country. I can count on 2 hands the instances where I've seen it being in the same country. That tends to happen more in, say, America, but in mainland Europe, it tends to be that the bank account is changed to another country or potentially on the other side of the world. The second red flag is in and around the beneficiary name. And when I say the beneficiary name, you're going to be making a payment to your supplier, their name. And what will happen potentially is the fraudsters will ask you to change the details of the banking instructions. And that is because they're worried about potentially confirmation of payee being done by the beneficiary bank, or the compliance that the beneficiary bank picking up on the fact that names don't match. So they're asking you effectively to change the banking instructions, potentially to match the name on the account where the money is going to be paid, the mule account. And that could be they ask you to pay it to a different company, or they pay it to an individual. And the excuses they will give is, can you pay it to our sister company or a parent company, or can you pay it to our agent? Now, that's not to say in every business email compromise you are going to see or receive a request to change the beneficiary name, but it can happen. And again, that's a red flag. The other one, which we have seen, pretty much in every case, and has been very prevalent with regard to COVID-19, as I sort of alluded to at the start, is the reason given. You've got to remember that you're in a situation here where effectively you're being asked to suddenly change the banking details, and the fraudsters feel that you need to be convinced, because obviously they're sending an email very quickly after you've received the sort of first email with the legitimate instructions. So they will provide a reason for it. And during COVID-19, we actually had one of the reasons was, please don't pay it to this bank account. So coming back to our example, please don't pay it to the bank account in Malta because the bank manager there has died of COVID-19. Please, can you pay it to our other bank account, which is in, say, Hong Kong? That is a sort of excuse we've seen during COVID-19. As we move out of COVID-19 towards sort of out of the lockdown phase and perhaps back to some sort of normality, we are seeing the fraudsters revert to the normal excuses like, we're having a tax investigation, or we've had a bad check, or similar. And that is the sort of reason you will be given for the sudden change in banking instructions. The other one is the variant in the email address. Now, I said you're going to receive you're going to receive an email with regard to the new banking instructions. If they're not spoofing, and more often than not, I think it's over 95%. I saw some details this morning where it's more likely to be either a personal email address or a lookalike email address that the fraudsters will send that email from in terms of the new banking instructions. It's a case of how often do you look at email addresses? And the fraudsters try and make an attempt with regard to lookalike email address where there could be an extra I or a dash somewhere in it, making you on, a quick look at the actual email address. It looks the same as your supplier. But effectively, the thing to do here is keep looking at email addresses, specifically around transactions, specifically around potential change of beneficiary. Have a look at the email address with regard to what you know is the correct email address for your supplier. Can you see a difference? And there are three more, which very much in and around the sort of email itself. The next one is inconsistencies in the email. And what I mean here is that, you may see font changes. You've got to remember that primarily in most cases that the fraudsters are not sending the email from the email account of your supplier. They're sending it from their own email account. So they will have to copy and paste, because they've obviously, you can see the email chain. They will have to copy and paste potentially from an email that has been legitimately sent, copy it into their email, and then send an email on top. And they make mistakes. They make mistakes with regard to font. They make mistakes with regard to missing off the signature. They make mistakes with regard to the grammar and the structure. And you've got to remember that in most cases, they're not going to be in the country of the supplier. They're going to be on the other side of the world. So that language in relation to that email may not be their first maybe they're not their first language. The other thing is the invoices. A lot of the time we see PDFs being used for invoices, and you're going to get in a situation where you're going to receive a new PDF from the fraudster. And the best thing to do there is compare the PDFs that you have, the legitimate invoice and the new invoice. Have a look at the fonts. In the legitimate invoice, you'll probably see it's exactly the same font all the way through the PDF. If you look at the new invoice with regard to the new banking instructions, have a look where the banking instructions are. You'll probably find that in that one, the actual font has changed because it's a copy and paste over the top of a PDF. These fraudsters don't actually have, the right software to effectively recreate a PDF. They're effectively using very basic software where they just copy and paste a section over the top, and they won't get the right font. The final one is something we see quite a lot of, is pushing you to make the transaction very quickly. They're suddenly sending you new banking instructions, but they also want you to do it very quickly. And the thing I would say here is that they're doing it because they don't want to get caught. They want the transaction to go through very quickly before someone gets suspicious. So, think about your supplier in the past. Have they pressurized you? Is this sort of normal practice for them with regard to, making payments? Do they pressurize you, and do they say to you, do it very quickly? The other thing I'd say at this stage is they may ask you, you may say as part of your own approval process, if you have one, look, I'm going to give you a call just to confirm this is correct. The fraudsters will not want that. They don't want you to make the phone call to, you know, the correct phone number with regard to your supplier, because obviously the game will be up then. What they will say to you is, look, my phone's not working. Can we do this on WhatsApp? Can we do this on Skype? Can we do this on Facebook? They do not want that personal contact, because with that personal contact, verbal contact, you're going to realize straight away that it's a fraud. So there are simple ways to mitigate the risk of business email compromise, business email fraud. Quite apart from, you know, software usage like DMARC with regard to your email account, the one thing I would say with regard to business email compromise is verbal confirmation. Verbal confirmation is the key. Picking up the phone when you're in this situation and phoning your supplier, your customer, and saying to them, you know, did you just send me an email asking me to change the banking instructions to say Hong Kong? You know, and they will turn around and say, well, no, I haven't got a clue what you're talking about. You know, that is the surefire way of stopping business email compromise. And therefore, you need to have good record keeping. You cannot rely on anything in that email that the fraudster has just sent, or potential fraudster has just sent, you know, with regard to the new banking instructions. Do not refer to any phone number in that email. Use your records that you're keeping up to date with regard to your suppliers, with regard to your customers, and phone them using those records. And then you're certain, or, you know, pretty much certain, if you'll keep your records up to date, to phone your true supplier, and then you can confirm or deny with them with regard to the banking instructions. And that is it in a nutshell with regard to business email compromise. I know it's a short run through, but effectively, as I say, it is not a sophisticated fraud. It is something that you can stop by knowing the red flags, by ensuring that all of your employees know about the red flags, by having an approval process in place with regard to these sort of changes, making sure that you have double approval, four eyes approach, making sure that no one person is just signing this off. And as I say, the best thing you can do is verbally confirm those details, those new details with regard to a potential change of beneficiary. So that is in a nutshell, Abigail. It's a quick run through with regard to business email compromise. I'm quite happy to take questions from anyone in relation to this or any other subject with regard to fraud.
Thank you very much, Alan. I think that was very, very interesting and very insightful, with great details of what you should do. And basically I think last week we encountered a case, and as time is going on, we are seeing an increased level of sophistication of these incidents. At face value, in a very quick look at the email this member received, it looked like an identical, very normal email that they would have received, and they thought nothing much of someone asking them to change the IBAN that they usually transfer the money to. But obviously, as you said, looking closer and giving it a bit more thought, then they could realize that there were some red flags, as you mentioned, related to something being abnormal going on. I think the suggestion that you made regarding taking a phone and getting in touch just to confirm, I think that is something that everyone should do when making an online payment and a transfer, and someone asks them to change the method of, or the address of where the payment should be sent. It should be a part of the process. So thank you for that very much, Ellen. I think our attendees have been taking notes, but I guess that we will also pass on the presentation, if that is okay for you, Ellen, to those that have attended this session, so that they will be doing a whole system for themselves and passing it through their team. So now, if we get any questions for Alan, we will be sharing them with Alan, because he will be with us, I think, for the rest of the session. And I would like to introduce the remaining people that will be doing the presentation today, who are Inspector Timothy Zamid, who is Head of Cyber Security and Crime Unit at the Malta Police Force. We also have, we will going back to Western Union because we have Mark Anthony Camilleri, who is the country manager and executive director for Malta of the Western Union Business Solutions. And finally, we will be having Martin Camilleri, and Martin is coming from Meta. He is the project manager, security engineering team. So I think we will be giving a very good overview of how to be secure online from a business point of view. But without further ado, I can pass on the word to Timothy. Timothy, I know that you have been doing a lot of valid work from the cybercrime unit as a Malta police force, both in educating, because I have seen very good spots on the media on educating about cybercrime. And also, obviously, you are at the other end of the coin as well, because you have to investigate cases and deal directly with them hands-on. In your good hands.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. By way of introduction, I am Inspector Timothy Zammit. I have been in the police force for the past 17 years. And I started off my career within the Economic Crimes and the Money Laundering Unit. And eventually, for the past 13 years, I have been assigned to the Police Cybercrime Unit. The primary role of the Police Cybercrime Unit is to provide technical assistance in ongoing criminal investigations. So basically, our primary role is to be that technical arm in investigations, whether it is related to pure cybercrime cases, such as, for example, cases of hacking or data breaches, as well as other types of criminal activity, which we usually refer to as cyber-enabled crime. Perhaps the most predominant type of cyber-enabled crime is actually online fraud, is actually financial forms of cybercrime. And basically, our role is primarily to preserve evidence, to carry out the technical inquiries that will allow us to identify and trace the perpetrators. And as well, during follow-up investigations, we are also regularly called in to assist in the collection of devices, of digital devices, as well as the analysis of those devices during criminal investigations. We have spoken about COVID and its effect on the situation. Just to give you an overview, when the cybercrime unit started, and that was back in 2003, the cybercrime unit back then handled around 50 cases in an entire year. Last year was a year when we handled around just under 1,000 cases. So it's around 900 cases in an entire year. This year so far, we have already surpassed the 700 case mark. So since the beginning of the year, we've had a substantial increase when compared to last year. And the largest increase is actually in relation to cyber fraud, to online fraud. The reason is that obviously criminals have used the confusion that COVID has brought about to their advantage, and are obviously taking and have obviously found online fraud as actually a very good way of making money, especially when there's confusion and as well some panic has settled in. Without taking too much of your time, perhaps starting off, never have I ever said or thought, perhaps, and I think all these quotations perhaps to apply to each and every one of us. And this brings to the fore the issue of complacency. In a fast-moving environment, one of the strongest tools that a perpetrator is actually using, one of the things that the criminal is using to his advantage, is the fact that we are sometimes not bothered at checking or double checking situations we are coming across. In fact, in our proactive work, in our prevention work, the thing that we are actually doing most is trying to challenge the thought process. So actually moving on, transitioning from a situation where we are clicking first and then thinking about the consequences later, to a situation where we are actually thinking before clicking. Okay, so thinking about the consequences, thinking about the information we are being shown, thinking about the versions we are being told prior to providing information, prior to clicking on the attachments, on the links that we have contained in emails, prior to perhaps sending out monies as has been directed in communications. And this brings me to my next slide, which is basically we need to apply a risk-based approach. So in the same way that we have learned that when we are crossing the road, we need to look at both sides of the road. Okay, otherwise one day or another we'll probably be run over by a bus or by a car. The same thing needs to apply to our online activity. So basically it's about stopping, thinking about what's going to happen, and then acting upon it. So essentially, in most cases, it's simply a question of not clicking straight away, not responding straight away to an email, taking the time, even if it's just counting down to 10, even if it's just counting down to 3, to simply stop and think before proceeding with a transaction or with a communication. And basically, the risk-based approach starts with understanding the value of the information that I'm sharing. So what information am I being asked, and how can this be used against me? Sometimes we get telephone calls from clients and perhaps from people within organizations who will tell us, listen, I just bought something off the internet. I just made a payment 5 minutes ago. And after making the payment, I Googled up the shop and I am suspecting that it is a fraud. Or I have been corresponding with someone online. I sent him copies of my identification documents, and now I am worried. It should be actually the other way around, using the internet as a source of information, stopping, thinking about the consequences, and then proceeding. Do I know what information, how the information that I am being asked is going to be used? Do I know who I am dealing with? Can any of the information that I'm being provided be independently verified? So is it just a question that I have followed a link on social media? Is it just a question of believing at face value the information that is contained in an urgent email message that I have received? If I am going to proceed with a transaction, do I know what type of remedial action can be taken if something goes wrong with regards to, for example, my purchase? All right. And when speaking about remedial action, it's not simply asking the seller, asking the person at the other end, what can I do if something goes wrong? Because obviously fraudsters will tell us things that we want to hear in order to get hold of our money. And last but not least, are we aware of the latest risks that perhaps we are facing in today's digital society? And the next few slides in the next few slides, I will be giving a very brief overview of some of the latest risks that we are coming across at a local level. So first and foremost, anyone still running Windows XP? I think it's time to move your computers. It's time to move your machines to a museum. The same applies to other systems that are no longer updated. And here I am referring to, for example, Windows 7 machines. Okay, Windows 7 machines nowadays are no longer supported. They are no longer being patched. They are no longer being updated. Now, in a corporate environment, in an organizational environment, we do understand that sometimes change takes time. But please be aware that when you are using legacy systems, when you are using old systems that are no longer being supported, that means that you are opening yourself up to vulnerabilities. You are opening yourself up to fraudsters, up to criminals that will exploit the fact that your systems are not up to date. Going back a couple of years, perhaps you would have heard about WannaCry, which was a type of malware, which was a type of computer virus that wreaked havoc across Europe, including the fact that it also affected health institutions in the United Kingdom, for instance. And the reason why WannaCry was actually quite successful is that it was exploiting vulnerabilities in legacy systems, such as, for example, Windows XP. Now, what was happening was that these health institutions, because of the fact that their medical equipment would not work properly if it were connected with more recent versions of operating systems, the fact that these health institutions in some cases were actually relying on legacy systems, on old machines, meant that once the malware once the malware infected one of these machines, and these machines were connected to a network, the malware actually could very easily propagate itself and be shared across the entire network. So please make sure that from time to time you are updating your systems, and you are also making an assessment of when these systems also perhaps need to be replaced as well. Secondly, ransomware. Now, these are screenshots that take us a couple of years back. Actually, we started coming across ransomware cases, I think, back in 2014. And through ransomware, what is actually happening is that the individual will be using his computer. Eventually, he will be presented with a message, with a pop-up message telling him, your computer has been infected, your computer has been seized. Okay, in this case, it was seized by the police, although that is not actually the case. And you need to pay a fine, you need to pay money in order to be able to continue using your computer. Now, these are these are amongst the earliest versions of ransomware that we came across. These were more of a nuisance, and the reality is that in most cases, people were able to run an antivirus software, get back control of their machines by removing this malware, and be able to continue using their machines as normal. Malware, this type of malware, however, ransomware, has actually evolved. And nowadays it has evolved into a more sophisticated type of ransomware that is not simply acting as a nuisance because it is temporarily stopping you from continuing to use your machine, but it is actually taking control of your documents. So what happens in these cases is it is actually encrypting your information. So it is getting your information, putting a password on that information, and although although your files are still residing on your computer, you cannot access these files because they have been encrypted. So there is a password that will not be given to you unless you have paid the ransom. And in some cases, the ransom can run into hundreds, if not even thousands of euros. You can imagine the disruption that this causes to organizations that are actually relying on information for their day-to-day work. We have come across companies where, for example, they told us, listen, we had all our information on this particular machine. It was backed up on the same machine, or it was backed up on a server that was continuously online. So actually what happened is that the malware also infected the backup, and we have lost all our information. Information, for example, could have included information related to past tenders or past procurement processes. And actually you come in a checkmate situation where perhaps the company might be prompted or might be lured into actually paying the ransom in order to get their information back. Now, with regards to ransomware, there are projects in place. There have been initiatives also by law enforcement. There is, for instance, a project that is running its own website, which is called nomoreransom.org, whereby an individual who has been affected by ransomware can actually upload one of the files that has been infected, and the website will check whether we have been able to reverse engineer that malware. If that is the case, the individual would be provided with the key free of charge in order to get their information back. The reality, however, is that ransomware, the way that it is being propagated, it is actually changing itself as time goes by. So it is actually very difficult. It is sometimes very difficult for a company and actually to obtain its information back. So the take-home message here is please make sure that your systems are up to date, as I have already said previously, but also make sure that you are taking backups of your information, and that backup is stored offline or in a secure location. It's the same thing with having, for instance, a laptop. If I had all my information on my laptop and I lose my laptop, or perhaps I drop my laptop, all the information on my device would actually have been lost. So it is actually very important that from time to time, we also make sure that the most important information is also being backed up securely. We've already spoken about fraudulent email messages. Also, the previous speaker has made reference to them. One of the most actually effective ways of sending out malware, of distributing malware, is actually by sending out an email and telling people that there's either a pending invoice or actually there is someone who has sent them a package. All right. It's something that has to do with human nature, where people actually start clicking left, right, and center the moment someone tells them there's a parcel in the post for them. So once again, before we click on those links, before we download a Word document or a PDF file that is contained in that email message, we need to ask ourselves, was I expecting something? Is the supplier that is sending me an invoice actually someone with whom I have a previous relationship? Because if someone who I never had contact with before has been sending me an email asking me for payment, actually, if we have never spoken previously, then there should be no pending payment. So it's actually a question of stopping and thinking before clicking on those links, before responding or engaging with the person sending us these emails. Another type of example is remote access situations. A few years back, we had a wave of people receiving telephone calls and telling them that and being told that there's a problem on their computer, and people telling them we are from Microsoft or we are from another computer company, and you seem to have a virus on your computer, and we are here to help you out in resolving the situation. No one does anything. No one does anything for free, and usually there is a scope behind these unsolicited telephone calls. The people who would be following the instructions they are being provided in most of the situations would be actually giving remote access to their computer. So actually the perpetrators, the criminals, would be directing the individual to visit a particular website or to follow a link. In most cases, they would have convinced the user that there's something wrong on their computer because they would have quoted a serial number or a particular code. This serial number or this particular code would be something that is common throughout most installations, would be something that is common throughout most computers. Once the individual has been convinced, they are directed to a website, and once they exchange information that is found on the screen, the 6-digit code or a verification code, they are actually giving remote access of their machine to the person at the other end. And for those of you who have never heard of remote access is actually giving a person at the other end the opportunity to use your computer as if he were sitting in front of it. So it's actually very, very important to ensure that we know what we are doing, we know what permissions we are giving to the person at the other end whenever we are following instructions, especially if they are people that we do not know or that we haven't spoken to them previously. We have already mentioned in today's webinar the issue of business email compromise and business email fraud. These are examples of cases of CEO fraud, where you would have the chief financial officer or the accounting officer receiving fraudulent instructions from the CEO. So actually, the financial officer would receive instructions for an urgent payment that needs to be made. These instructions would seem to be originating from the CEO, Whereas once the payment is made and perhaps a couple of days later, when the financial officer needs the signatures in order to formalize everything, they would have then one would realize that actually the instructions were fraudulent and the transaction that has been sent out was actually a case of a fraud. Now, we have mentioned that in most cases, it is actually a business email compromise. So you would have either the supplier or the victim or a person at the, or actually a company with whom the organization has already had a previous relationship actually being compromised. So someone has hacked into their emails and actually gone through their correspondence to get an understanding of perhaps the hierarchy in the company, perhaps trying to understand past payments, and also trying to impersonate those same persons and emulating and replicating previous payments. However, we have also come across cases where actually it was down to social engineering. So perpetrators in some cases are actually taking the time, are actually doing an effort into understanding who the CEO is, understanding his, perhaps the structure of the email address, understanding who would be the accounting officer, who would be the chief financial officer, and also, and then creating email accounts that are strikingly similar to the CEO's email account in order to send fraudulent instructions to the chief financial officer. Once again, the take-home message here is, and perhaps I am repeating a point from the previous presentation, do question any change in circumstances. So if it is not normal for the CEO to send instructions for urgent payments, then once there is an urgency in the matter, this change in circumstance needs to be questioned. And picking up the phone and communicating with the person directly through other means is one of the most effective ways of actually verifying the authenticity and the genuinity of the instructions that are being imparted. Another method is also with regards to perhaps payments being made to suppliers that for whom we are sending out regular payments, is also to take notes, to make a note of the IBAN of the suppliers. So it's not a question of simply copying the IBAN from an invoice, because unfortunately that is sometimes that these are things that happen, that the person making the payment is simply copying the IBAN that is found on the invoice and affecting the transaction there and then. Please, it is a good practice to have a register of IBANs of the verified IBANs for the suppliers. And if the IBAN on the invoice is actually different, this needs to be verified not through email but through other channels. Speaking of CEO fraud, speaking of business email compromise, this has become an issue. In Malta, we have had issues where companies have been defrauded out of hundreds of thousands of euros. And and earlier this year, we also had an issue where actually a company was defrauded of a payment of over 4 million euros through a case of business email compromise. And in this particular case, we eventually found out that the victim company had been corresponding with the fraudsters for a number of weeks. So actually the fraudster, after being able to gain access into one of the email accounts pertaining to either the supplier or the victim company, had actually understood when the next payment will be due, and had actually anticipated the genuine invoice by a couple of hours, and sent as a very similar invoice with only the IBAN details being different. Once again, it's important that transactions are actually checked, the 4I principle, so having another person check these transactions, and also if necessary also checking transactions, reconciling also on at the end of the day or the following day. because once a few days have surpassed, it's actually very difficult to reverse transactions and get the money back. So once again, and in conclusion, it's simply applying the precautions we are taking in everyday life to our online activity, stopping, thinking about what we're going to do, and then acting upon those instructions, or deciding to take a cautious approach and verifying prior to moving ahead. So how important is the information that we are processing? Why do we need to protect it? Are we engaging someone to protect it, or are we doing everything in-house? And this is perhaps one of the most important things when it comes to small and medium organizations. Unfortunately, from experience, sometimes small and medium organizations would not have their own IT department, so they would rely on external contractors. Now, it's one thing having a reputable external contractor. It's another thing relying on a university student, no offense, or someone with very limited experience in order to administer and protect your IT systems. It's also taking a risk-based approach and understanding what technical measures need to be put in place in order to protect our IT systems. We cannot be too restrictive, because once we implement very restrictive measures, usually what happens is that they will start working, and after a few days, we start rescinding on those measures. So taking a risk-based approach and making sure that the most sensitive information is protected, and also perhaps taking a more lenient approach with regards to perhaps other areas. Last but not least, it's very important that our users are aware. When it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to cyber prevention, one of the weakest links remains the user. Okay, so it is not simply a matter of having our IT department informed about the latest threats and making sure that they have the latest technology at their disposal. Sometimes it could be the weakest link. Sometimes it could be the receptionist manning the telephone or manning our generic email address. Sometimes it could be the person doing clerical work that are targeted, and that are targeted with fraudulent emails, with phishing emails. And if actually they have given access to our system, if they have given information that they shouldn't have given out, we have still been compromised. And last but not least, it's also important to have good policies in place and a procedure in place to escalate a situation once things go wrong. In this line of work, it's not a question of if, it is a question of when things go wrong. Okay, so it's also important to have business continuity policies in place in order to ensure who should be doing what once we realize that something has gone wrong. Okay, so in summary, it's about making sure that we have reviewed the account settings, having good password policies in place, and having these policies also communicated to our employees. If I had to say what perhaps would be one of the most common passwords right now, would probably be July 2020. And at the end of the month, when the IT administrator would ask our employees to change their password, most of the employees would probably change it to August 2020. It's a different password. It's actually not a very strong password, and I'm sure that you would agree. Having control over personal data, our own personal data, as well as the personal data pertaining to our clients, with which we have been entrusted, and also having the mechanisms in place in order to log and also audit what has been going on. So once again, it's a risk-based approach. Stop, think, and act. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Timothy. That was very, very useful indeed. Coincidentally, yesterday, we issued the results of a survey that we ran with all our members, very, very different sectors. And something that came out is that during COVID, business was very low and they are still struggling to start catching up. And it's interesting to note that the fraudulent business activity, so to say, made up for this time and actually started doing well. And it's something that is important to realize, because we need to be more watchful during these times, and we would be maybe stressed and having a lot of things on our mind, but we need to concentrate and really give time and in what we are doing. Really understand what you are reading and what you are accepting, even when maybe you do not have the full mindset and the full capacity to do that. And this is also a time, as you rightly pointed out, it is not enough for the business owner and for the IT team to be aware. It is an opportunity, and it is something that you will still need to do as business owners, to have specific policies in place related to cybersecurity, give training to your employees. Therefore, use this time that business maybe is a bit more quiet to get these things in place and be stronger. Once we get out of the full effects of COVID, we need to come out stronger. Before I take a couple of questions that came in, I wanted to ask maybe about the methods of redress. If someone has had one of these, especially fraud related to money being transferred to not the recipient that it was meant to be transferred to, how should they go about it, and what is the best outcome that they should expect?
Okay, so one of the most important things that is done first and foremost is that the bank, that the victim's bank is informed, because in some cases, especially when the bank is informed straight away, the bank would be able to communicate with its counterpart in order to ask for the monies that have been transferred to actually be held in abeyance. Actually, in those cases, it's actually up to the bank at the other end, because in most cases, when this bank-to-bank correspondence is taking place, it actually depends on the bank at the other end. However, we've had cases where the bank at the other end, and we've had a number of cases where actually banks in other EU member states have been used to receive these monies, were actually taking a cautious approach and actually holding on to the money and not allowing the client at the other end to withdraw those funds or transfer them elsewhere. In those cases where actually the transaction has taken place in the previous day or two, it's also important for the police to be informed. The police, particularly the Economic Crimes Unit, form part of a network, and they also have the international contacts in place to contact their counterparts in other countries in order to ask for the freezing of these monies when it comes to asset recovery. Okay, so when it comes to the freezing of funds at the other end. Unfortunately, the possibility of actually reversing a transaction and getting the money back decreases the more time passes. So once 48 hours have elapsed, once a couple of days have elapsed, it is very, very, very difficult actually to reverse those transactions. There have been cases, however, where actually the fraudsters, where actually the perpetrators were very sloppy, and there were mistakes in the IBAN number or in the beneficiary details in the beneficiary details. In those cases, when you have sent out a payment and the person comes back and tells you, listen, we had a mistake in the transaction, please carry out, please make those changes urgently, that is another red flag that you need to re-verify, recheck everything anew before making those changes. Because unfortunately, we had cases where the transaction at first was sent out in a way that it wouldn't have been successful. The fraudster contacts the victim again, asks them to make a change or two. The victim, being convinced that this was actually a genuine request, will do those changes, and actually the second time round the money would have actually gone through. In most cases, the banks would also request a police report. Now, in most cases, the police report would be done at a local police station. However, people can also contact the cybercrime unit on our generic email address. So it is computer.crime@gov.mt, or as contacting us by telephone, and we will be directing you accordingly on the information that we will require from your end as well.
Thank you for that. And Inspector Zamit, I wanted to take a couple of comments from our attendees and questions. Someone is saying, even if ransom is paid, there will be no guarantee that the attackers give you the key.
Yes, indeed. That is actually our word of advice. When people are attacked with ransomware, they should not pay the ransom. When you are paying the ransom, you are actually helping out the criminals in order to achieve their aims. So paying out the ransom is actually something that we do not suggest. Obviously, when you're paying out the ransom, there is no guarantee that you will get hold of your information. And there have been cases where actually persons have paid out the ransom and they were actually asked for more money. So the perpetrators would say, listen, this person is actually interested, is considering this information so important to them, so we'll actually ask for additional monies before giving them back their information.
Someone is also saying, as a word of advice, financial officer could also create a template on BOV or HSBC, etc., and always use the same safe IBAN number rather than entering an IBAN every time.
Yes, indeed. As I have already said, it's a good idea to either have a register of verified IBAN numbers. In some cases where actually perhaps there's a contract ongoing. In some cases, you might have cases where there is actually the payment details contained in that same contract. So it is important that then one sticks to the payment details contained in that contract, and not to any payment details which are listed out in the invoice.
Someone is asking, do you have particular suggestions for iGaming companies, maybe from cases that you have encountered?
Okay, so with regards to iGaming companies, I usually don't look at the technology or the products being used. I usually take the same approach for each and every technology. So whether it is iGaming, whether it is blockchain, whether it is God knows what's coming around the corner in a couple of months or in a couple of years' time, it's always a question of making sure that your staff are aware of the latest risks and informing your staff and reminding them over and over again. So it's not a question of doing a seminar or doing a presentation once a year in February, perhaps when it's Safer Internet Day, or in October when it's Cybersecurity Month, but it is something that needs to be held regularly, even if, for example, sending out a reminder every week with something different. Because unfortunately what happens is that we will do a presentation, we will do a seminar, several months elapse, nothing happens. Then the moment that we realize that we have been victimized, we send out an email to everyone reminding them of their responsibility. So it is important very important to have the policies in place, making sure that our employees are reminded of their obligations and of these policies, and also enforcing them where necessary.
And maybe a follow-up question to that, Claire is asking us, what should small companies do to protect their IT systems? What types of companies should we approach to help us protect ourselves? In fact, Alex from Western Union answered saying that I would consider some DMARC software. Maybe you can add a bit to that.
Okay, so with regards to companies offering cyber security services, there are a number of companies in Malta. I will not indicate a company or another. However, it's important that you seek the services of a company that is reputable, so that has previous experience in this area, and not rely on one-man shows. Whether it is students, whether it is people who are doing this as a part-time work over and above their full-time job. Because actually when you're relying on someone who's actually able to contribute perhaps an hour or two every couple of days, it's actually someone with all due respect, that is an amateur when compared to a reputable organization. And this is actually very important. If there is a company that is actually migrating and has a very good online presence, or it is also important to take to carry out risk assessments, to carry out penetration testing, to carry out risk assessments of your infrastructure, and also identifying the weakest vulnerabilities, the weakest areas, the vulnerabilities in your system and in your procedures as well.
Thank you for that. And Joe is telling us excellent presentations by both speakers so far. Appreciate copies of the PowerPoint.
No problem.
That is okay with you. Thank you very much. We will be passing on the presentations. And I think now we can move. Thank you very much, Inspector Zammit.
Thank you.
And we can move to Mark Anthony Camilleri. As I said, Mark Anthony is the country manager and executive director for Malta of Western Union Business Solutions. Mark, like we were discussing even before with Inspector Zammit, this is not exactly the core. Educating about cybersecurity and fraud is not your core business, but we appreciate that you have teamed up with us to educate businesses and our members, because obviously it is an important part of the work that you still do, and we appreciate reaching out to us with these presentations. Maybe you can give us also an overview of other services that you offer at Western Union.
So first of all, thank you for having us, and thanks Alex, and thanks Inspector Zammit for a detailed explanation. And I'm happy that Western Union as a whole invests a lot of money and investment to prevent fraud and to obviously protect our customers when doing their payments. So it's one of our core bases, and we have a lot of procedures that we follow, like I said, to reduce or to prevent in full fraudulent payments. So once again, thank you for the opportunity. Just to give some information about Western Union. Western Union, as in some numbers that we are proud to have, how we can help businesses, our platforms, and obviously the onboarding process, the due diligence that we have to go through to sign up a company, a client, right? Our story, a very long story, 169 years in business. We're one of the oldest stock exchange listed company in the US, part of the S&P as well. 60,000 individuals and business clients throughout the world, 500 plus bank partners, bank accounts, 60 plus bank partners across the globe in different currencies. We're present in 200 plus countries and territories across the globe. And obviously our focus is outgoing payments. Therefore, we have 130 plus currencies, approximately 150 currencies that we can do payments out with, and 30 incoming currencies. So as you can see, we can cover all scope of businesses and all business opportunities as well. So what are the business challenges and solutions that we offer? We obviously, like I said, the focus is currencies and payments, so we can manage payments either going out and coming in a more efficient way. As I said, we're well connected throughout the globe. We're well connected throughout all the jurisdictions. We have banking partners across the globe, so it's easier for us to transfer money from A to B. We have dedicated people, dedicated personnel that help our customers to protect their costs, to protect their exchange rates and payments. So we have CRMs that will help forecast these costs or forecast the future payments to get the best rate possible and to reduce cost where possible. Which obviously can be an exercise to cost cut and to improve your business going forward. We don't base ourselves on just cost. As I said, we help businesses to grow internationally and to grow partners across the globe by having other products and our platforms that we use. What are our customer needs, most especially with the SMEs? FX visibility, like I said, risk management, FX exposure, cost cutting on FX, and efficiency, which is one of the main criterias and one of the main issues that an SME encounter, right? I mean, you have a contract, you have a payment that you need to get on time before you lose shipment, which might lose your client, it's all a chain, or you might lose the contract because you're paying late. Cash flow sometimes can be tough on anyone, and it's sometimes you get your cash flow at the very end of your contract, which then you need to get your payment across very fast and very efficiently, and that is where we are 100% capable of doing. The reporting functions, this is more for the CFOs and for the accountancy people, for the finance people. We have a platform which is connected through all WUBS companies, and I'll explain later on this presentation. It is a platform that we use globally, so it's well connected, and the reporting functions that we invested in on Edge are, in my opinion, state of the art. So that is something that is easy for every client that is in our portfolio, and obviously, like I said before, FX risk management, dedicated CRMs, and streamlined payments across the globe. This is something that we are obviously proud on. Our CRMs work continuously with the clients. They're always there to support people calling us on our mobile, obviously, and we can help them out immediately, which is something that obviously SMEs suffer locally, because sometimes it's very long to get that person that can help you with other banks, right, or other competitors. Something that we invest a lot of time and investment in. Who do we offer our services? We have big range, right? So we have small businesses that cover mostly our portfolios, but then we have corporate companies, we have financial institutions, we have banks working with us in Malta and even outside Malta. Legal enterprises, education. In Malta, it's not that huge, but across the globe, it's a massive industry, which we are very professional on, and NGO as well. NGOs, obviously, Malta is so small, but again, there are countries in the world that offer these services to NGOs. And the good thing about Western Union is that our knowledge is spread within all countries, right? So we learn from each other, we improve our services from each other, and then we're happy to help our clients with each other as well. So what is WUEdge? WUEdge is a platform that I think as a normal banking platform, I like the way it works, but obviously it's a platform at the end of the day, where Inspector Zamit mentioned the record of all beneficiaries, where all beneficiaries are recorded there. Easy to follow up if anything changed. And like Alex and Inspector Zamit said as well, any changes, our people will connect with the clients, to confirm those bank details and confirm those details not just on the phone, but I mean, try and make the client to call the beneficiary as such to make sure that it's coming from the right source. And one of the major points of that is that if you have the beneficiary, which is a client of ours in another jurisdiction, you can pay that beneficiary in real time and with no fees as well, right? So it is a good way of doing services on. We have companies that are well connected within jurisdictions, and they are paying each other instantly without any delays, without any fees whatsoever. And then obviously the visibility into exposures, which like I said on the reporting, can give you the future payments that you hold, invoices that are upcoming, the currencies that you need to buy in the future. So the system will tell you how your exposure is working, how the rates are doing, what minuses or pluses, profit losses on exchange that you're having at that present time, which then make you obviously think about hedging your exposure or do a forward to protect your costs against your FX as well. And so that is basically the focus of it. And the good thing about us is that is the only and primary focus that we offer to our clients, right? We don't have other services as such. Our people just focuses on these things. Our people just are trained from compliance perspective, from fraud perspective, from the exposure perspective, to help the businesses out, right? To help the businesses out on such matters and to be more efficient and to grow our clients' businesses as well. Edge, award-winning platform. Once again, I mean, I've explained what Edge does mainly. Something that I've missed on Edge is the holding balances function. So where Western Union can keep your money for 90 days for future payments. So make it clear here, it's not a bank account, it's not a savings account, but where you can buy a currency from before the invoice. And for us to keep those currencies for 90 days, like I said, there are more than 30 currencies that you can keep currencies with us, not for more than 90 days to pay your future invoice. And in that way, you reduce costs. It's another way of doing a forward contract, but you actually have funds ready in your account, right? It's used as well for people that are exporting goods. You have an exporting to India, maybe paying you in dollars, or to China, paying you in yuan, and you want to keep your yuan for future payments, right? So that is something where we can help as well. And the good thing about it is that with us, you open an account, which gives you the facility to open 30 plus different currency holding balances account. Again, it's not savings account, but a holding balances account, which obviously facilitate your business and facilitate your costs. So that is the Edge platform. Again, our focus is on outgoing payments, on incoming payments, online payments, which is on Edge, and something else that we help with more the corporate side or the financial institution side of the industry is mass payments, although it can happen with SMEs, of course, as well, most especially with salaries, right? Salaries or any other expenses that you might have or beneficiaries that you might have. Some companies have more than a bulk payment that they pay beneficiaries in one go. And that is something that obviously we have various services to either upload a file with all the beneficiaries that you need to pay, or salaries or any other costs. So it is something that facilitate anyone sitting on internet banking and doing the payments rather than obviously upload one whole file with all its payments and delivery value dates, etc. So that is something that Western Union is doing already. Onboarding process. Obviously, this is something that needs to be done, which is something that we need to know the customer. We need to know the customer not just for due diligence purposes, but we need to know the customer to help the business, to see where we can help, to see where the gap is, and to see where we can help you grow, right? So it's not just for due diligence only, but to discuss solutions, to discuss platforms. We have various platforms with various facilities, and to help you develop a strategy as well with the FX market expertise that our employees have. So that is something that with all the reporting that Edge has, with all the manpower that we can give you or the knowledge that we have in the market, it is something that we can help you facilitate these payments from, like I said, holding balances to credit to forward buying, etc. So it is something that we do on the onboarding. It is something that we keep the relationship on. It is something that we would like. We always keep in touch with our clients. I'm sure there are some clients on this call, sorry, and they know that obviously CRMs will call them and to keep the relationship and to see where we can help you. So that is all from me. Very short, but I hope it was informative enough. And obviously, feel free to ask me as many questions as you prefer.
Thank you very much, Mark Anthony, for that. Very interesting to learn what good partners you are to businesses, and also that you take an interest beyond your core business, as we were saying before, but you have a genuine interest and then invested interest because you are doing this and other efforts, as you explained, to make sure that your clients are successful and as much as possible they don't go through the hardship of online fraud and other issues that they might experience. Thank you for that. If we get any questions, I will call you back in. And now I can move to Mr. Martin Camilleri from Meta. He is the project manager, security engineering team at Meta. Meta, obviously, are very important in this role of maintaining security online, both because in their hands lie all the public service, so to say, but you also reach further, not just the public sector. Martin, shall I leave it in your hands to discuss with us what Meta does and maybe share some insights from your end?
Yes, of course. I have a presentation, but I don't think you can upload it now.
No, I think you should be able to share this.
I share my screen. Can you see it now?
We see it fine.
Okay, very good. So thank you for the invitation. I will be, first of all, looking at what Meta is doing in the cybersecurity aspect as an agency which is responsible for the government IT infrastructure. So, just a small introduction. Meta is a government-owned ICT infrastructure and provides services to government. And it is the central driver for the government. So it drives ICT to government. Meta provides both ICT services and ICT infrastructure. Therefore, the government's connectivity to the outside world is provided by Meta, and that whole infrastructure and even the connectivity between all government departments is also a responsibility for Meta. We have this government network, we call it Magnet, and it interconnects all government agencies and government ministries and departments together, providing ICT services. And then that magnet is also being connected to the external world via the internet. As part of the departments within Meta, we have the Information Security and Governance Department. And this department is solely responsible for the cybersecurity aspect of the infrastructure. Now, the purpose of ISGD, as we call it in short, is to protect the government infrastructure. And Meta views the government infrastructure or this protection in three domains. Basically people, processes, and technology. And I will try here to focus on the aspect of technology. And the areas which we focus on technology are the application layer, where we have the applications and software development, things like that, and the security activities within that layer. Then we have the host layer, where it comes to servers, and we have a very, very large number of servers. And then we have the network layer, which is a another massive sort of one of the biggest networks within the country, where we have also protection on that layer. The ISGD, or the Security Department, conducts its activities based on 5 principles. That is, identify, detection, protection, response, and recovery. And I would like to give you an overview of how MITA took up security. So a little bit of history. In the older days, there was some kind of security thinking when MITA, formerly it was MITS at the time. And there was some security, but it was very, very basic. Like, for example, having a business continuity procedure where we can recover, but that was almost related to physical damage, like, for example, crashing of servers or something like that. So, and then MITA started to embark on the deployment of a corporate antivirus solution, which basically that was it. That was basically it. But as maybe a lot of you know, in 2008, there was this incident where somebody managed to hack into the corporate accounts of the government. And from there on, MITA realized the importance of security and started investing on security measures to properly protect the government infrastructure. I want to make it clear that pre-2008, even cybersecurity at that time, even on a global aspect, it was not that easy, or it did not have that focus, although there were major breaches at that time, but they were not really directed towards the Maltese government and things like that. But with the event that we have joined the EU, and with the event of cyber security activities increased, the government of Malta was one of the juicy targets, let's say, and it fell victim. And from there on, MITA realized that from 2008 that it should take security more seriously. It did not take it seriously, but it had to invest more. And this is one of the problems which sometimes organizations come across. It is the expense you have to invest in security, which is not really tangible, or it's giving you tangible results, like investing in something and it will give you profit. But in the long term, if you don't invest and you are attacked, then the losses are huge. Now, the department, the security department, is structured in a way that there are 4 different departments. We have the security engineering department, which is responsible for the protection, or let's say the prevention of security attacks. At the network layer, prevention techniques or prevention activities done by the security engineering are, let's say at the network layer, we do secure network designs. Therefore, let's say a new project or a new infrastructure or network architecture is being developed, and the security engineering, the security engineering team is involved in assessing the designs which have been developed, and from there, they assess them from a security point of view. Let's say, let me give you a small example. For example, a new government department needs to be connected to to the magnet and given access to the internet. From there, the team would look, the security team would look that the proper accesses and the proper network layer accesses, like firewalls and things like that, are properly configured to allow functionality, but not to allow everything. This may be an analogy for maybe in infrastructures which your organizations do, or at home, for example. If you have an internet connectivity at home, you don't have protection, no protection at all. Why? Because they give you a router, the service providers give you a router, and they connect you directly to the internet. Open for everyone. It's like leaving your door, your outside door, open for everyone. So the security team within Meta, that is its responsibility when there are new security architectures. So we call them also security architectures. On the current existing architectures, the team would do constant penetration testing activities for the simple reason to test the infrastructure. As Inspector Zammeet rightly said, old software can be susceptible to vulnerabilities, and there will be holes in those vulnerabilities, and they can be a launchpad or an access to your network. So with our penetration testing techniques, what we do is we try to test our systems if they are still configured in a way that they do not allow external entities or external individuals to penetrate into the system. And if any possible penetration paths or activities are identified, then these are informed back to the service teams so that corrective action could be taken. On a host layer, on a host level, the architecture team, this engineering team will set up security baselines for servers, for example. The basic security configuration of a server. We also investigate and see which host protection tools are the best. Meta employs a telemetry type protection, which then goes over to security operations, which I'll be coming back shortly. And these tools are installed on each server, picking up anomaly detection of traffic, for example, and this anomaly activity is relayed back to the Security Operations Center, which then it is investigated and see if it is an attack or not, and if it is an attack, we try to stop it, or we try to remediate it. We also ensure the server upkeep. We don't do the server upkeep ourselves because there are a lot of servers within the government infrastructure, but we instruct the service teams who are responsible for the servers to keep the software on the servers updated regularly. That is one of the regimes which Meta follows very strictly, because it is a reality that if you don't patch systems, you are vulnerable to attack, especially to zero-day vulnerabilities. Zero-day vulnerabilities are vulnerabilities which are existent in a piece of software which is not yet discovered, because all software has bugs in it and it has vulnerabilities. And there are people out there, either security professionals engaged by the product developers, or malicious security professionals, let's say them hackers, which on a day-to-day basis they reverse engineer, that is, they engineer in reverse systems or popular software, like for example, SharePoint. And when they reverse engineer, they come up and they find these vulnerabilities, which then they can exploit. And we often see these types of attempts on our infrastructure. Fortunately, with our tools and with our infrastructure deployed, we managed to detect these attempts, and we managed to detect these attempts not because we have patched the systems, but because we have detected anomaly behavior on our network. And because the patch was not yet available for the systems I am talking about. And what happened was that we detected the anomaly, we stopped the anomaly, and then we managed to get the patch because the patch was due to be released, and we contacted the vendor to give us the patch beforehand, and we patched our systems. But this happens, so it is very important to keep your systems updated. And we also do tools for identity monitoring. That is, we monitor the identity of our user base. That is, we would know all the logins who will log, and any anomaly logins are flagged. For example, we have systems where we can say, for example, my corp account, because we call them corporate accounts, my account. So I've logged in the morning, I went to the office in the morning, and I've logged into my account. And then I have finished my work and I have logged off my account. But then there is a detection that somebody or something logged with my account from the UK, for example. That is an anomaly for us. And we stop that, and we issue immediately an investigation to see what happens. So we have a lot going on in the Security Operations Center, which I will be explaining a little bit further. On the application aspect, we are conducting vulnerability assessments. Now, the difference between penetration and vulnerability assessments, there is a distinct difference, whereby penetration testing is that you sit on the network, from the network, and you try to get access to the network. So, all right, connected to the network. While a vulnerability assessment is an assessment of weaknesses, especially in software, where all the systems are scanned, okay, and then weaknesses are highlighted, especially all the major government websites, especially those websites which are considered as very important or critical, are continually assessed with these vulnerability assessments activities, where then vulnerabilities are highlighted. For example, we conduct a vulnerability assessment, and it often happens, and we identify that a particular website is using a very old version of transport layer encryption, all right, an SSL encryption, which is very old, version 1 or even less. That means that although the website is secure, that is, the traffic between the sites or between the site and the user is secure because it is encrypted, it means also but that since it is an old protocol, it has been compromised, so it can be easily cracked. So we inform the development team and say, listen, this is an old version, you have to upgrade to version 2. And so forth. We also detect, for example, cross-site scripting. That is, weaknesses in the websites, because through websites, a attacker can have a pathway into your network if an application is not properly developed. We also, right now, are embarking on an initiative where all the application software being developed by Meta or by its suppliers has to take into consideration security by design. That is, security has to be included in the design. We are doing away from getting the requirements of the application, develop the application, and then test it for security. No. During the requirement stage, we will be enforcing, or we will be giving the direction that the software during the requirement stage, it is also considered the security aspect of that, so that you can have an end-to-end development of a secure system, which at the end of the day, it will result in cost savings. The other department within the ISGD is the Security Operations Center. This is an ongoing operations center which is continuously monitoring the network infrastructure on the layers, on the different layers, which I have already explained, whereby there are a number of tools, detection tools, which are collecting logs and telemetry data, what we call it. And this data is being analyzed using artificial intelligence also. And any anomalies are messaged or warned to the Security Operations Center. What we do here is we have a lot of information coming in. Detection of suspicious activity, as I said, with AI tools, such as monitoring network traffic anomaly. For example, my computer is usually uploads or transfers 10 megabytes of data daily to the internet. So, which is a normal baseline, which is a normal. But if, for example, at any point in time, 10 gigabytes of data are detected, all right, coming out from my computer, that is, a warning is given to the Security Operations Center, and an immediate investigation is carried out to see why that amount of traffic, which is not normal, it is being transmitted. We do something similar on suspicious activity on user desktops through our antivirus and our, which is centrally, and our protection, let's say the protection tools which we have. If a user, one of our users, for example, clicks on a phishing email, and we already know about that phishing email, and we know what files does it drop on the desktop for compromising the desktop, our tools detect that. They alert the Security Operations Center, and that those files are blocked. And this is continuously going on. Once we detect a suspicious activity or a malicious activity, we don't stop there. We try to get the artifact or the device, or what is the file or the website, and we try to analyze that. And from that, we extract what we call IOCs. That it stands for indicators of compromise. That is, these are indicators, all right, of a particular compromise. So, for example, if I have a phishing email and I know the title and I know the URL, that is an indicator of compromise. And from that, these indicators of compromise are fed back into our detection tools, And if somebody else within the government infrastructure falls for that particular trick or something like that, our security tools will know and will stop it immediately. We don't stop there with the IOCs. We are embarking on an initiative now to share those IOCs also with other entities within the country, nationally and internationally. We are building also information and partnerships with other peers, so that not only we give them IOCs, but they give us IOCs also. So particular attacks which have been detected, for example, in the UK, and they give us the IOCs, and we has not yet reached our country, we would have our tools prepared for that type of attack. We have other two teams within the ISGT. The other department is the security governance, and this department is responsible for making sure that the security policies are in place, that the procedures are in place, and that they are properly followed. Okay, we are a very large organization, so it is very important to keep constant vigilance on the various teams within the agency, so that they are, they abide with the security procedures. And then we have the third or the fourth department, which has a national responsibility at this point in time, and this treats the people aspect. It is an initiative called Cybersecurity Malta, and through this initiative, we conduct awareness campaigns on a national level. I think most of you have seen Inspector Zammi doing these few minutes clips, and the other two are colleagues of mine who work with me. We also organize technical challenges, security technical challenges like hackathons, to give the opportunity to techies to discover and see the area of security. We have organized also the first National Cybersecurity Conference in October last year. And we do awareness campaigns, both in the public and in the private sector. And we also have initiatives to assist the private sector to do security assessments. So, in a nutshell, MITA is a very big agency, it's a very big organization. It is, therefore, it has to invest, and it has the luxury, or let's say not the luxury, but at least it has the finances to deploy proper security department and to ensure the security of a very large infrastructure. But just to close my presentation, I would like to deliver some quick wins to our listeners. Knowing that security is a big investment, so sometimes it's seen as a burden instead of a. But what I want to say is that if you invest now in security and keep your system secure, that will for sure will give you benefit, because if you fall victims of attack, even your business can suffer dearly. So what my recommendations are for quick wins are the following. It is important to have information security policies within your organizations, so that your employees and your staff would follow them. And they shouldn't be rocket science, but you will cover For example, you would cover, for example, password policy, so that they can, or everybody will deploy a secure password, and also the frequency of changing that password, because from that policy, then you can configure your servers to abide with that policy. Network access or internet access policy. For example, you deny, for example, access to, let's say, porn sites, for example, from your network infrastructure, not only because of morality, but also because porn sites are full of malicious software. And that policy can also transfer to the technology and go to your servers or your routers and block that type of traffic. The use of firewalls, it is very important not to connect to your network infrastructure or your internal network infrastructure directly to the internet. You use firewalls, there are a lot of firewalls, and again, the firewalls will allow access to the internet, to and from the internet, on your instructions. And if you have a policy, you can then apply that policy to the firewall. A very, very important aspect is awareness. Always educate your employees. Inspector Zamit also talked about this and stressed, and I stress it again because it is very important. It is important that all the employees know what they are doing and how to deal with certain events. For example, one of the things which you can say is, or it is easy to say, is that when you receive a letter from a bank, normally you don't receive it with "Dear Customer," but normally you receive it with your name. So if you receive an email from a bank with "Dear Customer," probably that is a fake email which is trying to trick you into doing something wrong. Important to do a backup. Keep backups of your systems, frequent backups, very important. Inspector Zamit also said this. And also very important, as Inspector Zamit said, to keep them off site and off your network. So take your backups and take them off your network, because as ransomware can also affect data backups. Important also to use anti-malware and antivirus software, okay, to have at least protection on your desktop. It is very important to consider multi-factor authentication also. That now, today, there are a lot of services being offered, even by big companies like Google and Facebook, and a multi-factor authentication will enable you not to use only password, but also something which you have. And normally, you use your mobile. On our systems in Meta, for example, if I want to connect to the VPN infrastructure, I connect to the infrastructure, I will be challenged for a password, my domain password, but then I receive a message on my mobile and authorize that message. And once I authorize that message, I am allowed access. So multi-factor authentication, it is what you know and what you have, is very important. And it is a good thing to consider. Always keep your software updated. That is very crucial. Okay, this is very crucial. If you are resorting to remote access to your systems, so you want to access them from your home or from your hotel room or something like that, do not resort to remote control software. That is not safe. Use virtual private networks. They are easily configurable. And today you don't need to buy appliances and special hardware for it, because this is offered also from a software point of view. So use VPN instead of remote access software. Always practice the least privilege access. So if you have a receptionist and the receptionist is only allowed to access the customer database, don't give it access to the financial database, to the HR database, because it is easy. Spend a little bit of time, look what and analyze what the employee accesses are required based on his responsibilities, and give those accesses only. And last but not least is share information. We are not talking here about your mishappenings or your misfortunes, but if you are compromised, or even if not, or it doesn't really matter, if you receive something which is compromisable, you should share that information. The technical information on how that compromise occurs, because that might greatly help other organizations. Hopefully, within the next few months, we will be, as Meta, we will be having an initiative on information sharing on a national level. And we will be, for sure, including the private sector in this, because we would like, and we are very keen to share information on compromises which we come across, because these may help you in defending your own systems. So we are trying to do that. We will try to disseminate this information to all organizations. Well, that is all. I hope you have, if there are any questions, please do not hesitate to answer.
Thank you very much for this, Martin. When it comes to sharing information, even though we have a bit of an us and them attitude when it comes to the private and public sector, I think this is one of the cases where there isn't a real distinction, apart that Meta has a lot more of resources than the private sector, as you mentioned. So sharing information with the private sector will make Malta smarter and more able to be prepared for these circumstances. So that would be very helpful, and we are very happy to cooperate and share this information with our members where necessary. You mentioned something also very important. Obviously, we represent SMEs, which are the majority in terms of size of businesses in Malta, but they are also the smallest business nuclei in terms of size. And these tend to see IT investments in general, as you said, intangible in terms of results, and therefore they are not that keen to commit. This is mostly, obviously, even more pronounced when it comes to security, IT security. So yes, that is something that is why we are doing this webinar, and we thank you for your participation. And I think more effort will be needed collectively so that we highlight how risky it is and what is at stake. It is like paying an insurance. Nobody likes paying insurances, but then when something happens, you really thank your lucky stars that you have paid this insurance and have some protection. In this case, it is related to the investment you do in your protection. As Inspector Zamit mentioned, the level of redress in this case is quite limited depending on the point that you catch the problem, and a lot of harm can be done, and prevention is the best way forward. I wanted to ask you maybe about something that you mentioned related to security checks for the private sector and how you help as Meta. Maybe you can give us just a little bit more detail in short about that, so that maybe if someone is interested to see more information where they can access this and what is this service all about.
Right now, there was a scheme launched by government, which now has closed, which is the Be Secure scheme, which will help businesses who have been selected on assessing their infrastructure. I don't know if there will be other similar schemes, which will for sure Meetup be the driver behind it. But what I can say is that for assistance to SMEs, what we will be doing is, as I said, we will be having this information sharing platform, which will disseminate information between different organizations. And we will hopefully give this information to SMEs to enable them protect their infrastructure.
Thank you very much for that, Martin. And I don't see that we have any further questions. So I thank you for participating. We will be sending a follow-up email as we usually do after the webinar, containing all the presentations that were delivered today for you to use as a reference. And as we said, it's important to spread the word with the rest of your team so that everyone is in the know and maybe do something very simple like steps to follow and keep them interested in the subject as you go along to alert their awareness. Thank you very much for joining us and hope you have a good rest of the day, and maybe we will see you for our next webinar next week.